Sola stood frozen at the bedroom doorway, her grandmother's old Bible trembling in her hands. The ancient book had fallen from the shelf as she'd been cleaning, and now a yellowed piece of paper lay exposed on the floor, a document covered in Korean characters she couldn't read, with her grandmother's name printed clearly at the bottom. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she picked up the paper, her fingers tracing the foreign letters. The date read 1963. Her grandmother had been 23 years old. The official stamps and signatures looked legitimate, governmental. But what made Sola's breath catch was the photograph attached to the document, a baby girl with features that looked nothing like the African children born in their village. "What are you doing in my room?" her grandmother's voice cut through the silence. Sola spun around to find grandmother Adunni standing in the doorway, her eyes locked on the paper in Sola's hands. For the first time in Sola's 26 years, she saw something she'd never witnessed before: fear in her grandmother's eyes. "Grandma, what is this?" Sola's voice barely rose above a whisper. Adunni moved forward with surprising speed for her 78 years, snatching the document from Sola's hands. Her fingers clutched the paper so tightly it crinkled. "It is nothing that concerns you. It has your name on it. It's in Korean. There's a baby in the photo." Sola's mind raced through the impossibilities. "Grandma, I don't understand." "And you don't need to understand." Adunni turned away, but Sola caught the slight tremor in her hands as she tried to fold the paper. "Did you adopt a child from Korea?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Adunni's shoulders stiffened. The silence stretched between them, heavy with decades of secrets. Finally, her grandmother's voice came out rough and strained. "I did not adopt her. I gave her away." The words hit Sola like a physical blow. She steadied herself against the door frame. "What? I gave my daughter away?" Adunni still wouldn't turn around. "I gave her to Korea." Sola's mind struggled to process the information. Her grandmother had only had one child, Sola's father, who had died in a car accident when Sola was 5 years old. There had never been any mention of a sister, an aunt, another relative. "I don't understand. How did you have a Korean daughter?" Adunni finally turned around, and the expression on her face made Sola take an involuntary step back. It was raw pain, decades old but still fresh. "Do you remember the stories I told you about the Nigerian Civil War?" Sola nodded slowly. Her grandmother had lived through the war as a young woman, though she rarely spoke about it in detail. "What I never told you was that during the war, there was a medical relief mission that came to our village. Foreign doctors and nurses trying to help. One of them was a Korean doctor named Lee Jae-hyun." Adunni's voice grew distant, as if she were looking back through time. "We fell in love in the middle of all that death and destruction." Sola sat down on the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. "You had a child together?" "Yes. A daughter. We named her Chioma, which means good God, because she was a miracle in such dark times." Adunni's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But Jae-hyun was killed in a bombing raid 3 months after she was born. The relief mission was pulled out because the war was becoming too dangerous. They offered to take Chioma with them, to raise her in Korea where she would be safe. Where she would have food and education and a future. But she was your daughter." Sola felt tears burning her own eyes. "She was my daughter in a war zone with no food, no medicine, no future." Adunni's voice cracked. "I was barely surviving myself. Her father was dead. I made a choice that has haunted me every single day for 57 years." Sola stood up and pulled her grandmother into an embrace. Adunni resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her granddaughter, finally releasing the grief she'd been holding for more than half a century. Does anyone else know? Sola asked softly. Your grandfather knew. That's why he married me. He was a good man who didn't judge me for what had happened. But we agreed never to speak of it. Your father never knew he had a sister. Adani pulled back, wiping her eyes roughly. And now you know, but it changes nothing. She's gone. She's been gone. Grandma, we could find her. Sola's mind was already racing with possibilities. We could search for her. No. The word was sharp and final. She has her own life now. She doesn't need an old woman disrupting it with stories of abandonment. You didn't abandon her. You saved her life. I gave her away. Adani's voice was hollow. That's all she would see. That's all anyone would see. Sola looked down at the adoption document, now crumpled from her grandmother's tight grip. The baby's face stared back at her aunt's face. Somewhere in the world, this person existed, completely unaware that her birth mother had been alive and grieving for her all these years. Grandma, if you were in her position, wouldn't you want to know the truth? Adani's expression hardened. This conversation is over. You will put that paper back in my Bible, and we will never speak of this again. But Sola couldn't let it go. As her grandmother left the room, Sola quickly took a photo of the document with her phone. She might not know Korean, but she knew someone who did. 3 days later, Sola sat in a small cafe across from her friend Hyun-woo, a Korean graduate student she'd met at the university. She'd told him she needed help translating a document for a research project. Now, as he studied the photo on her phone, his expression grew increasingly serious. This is an adoption registration form, he said slowly. From 1963. It's filed with the Seoul Metropolitan Government. What else does it say? Hyun-woo's eyes scanned the document. The child's name is listed as Lee Chioma. It says she was born in Nigeria in 1963 to Adani Okafor and Lee Jae-hyun. She was brought to Seoul by the International Red Cross Relief Mission. He looked up at Sola. Where did you get this? It's my grandmother's. The truth spilled out before Sola could stop it. I found it in her Bible. I didn't know she had given up a daughter until 3 days ago. Hyun-woo's expression softened with understanding. This must be very difficult for your family. My grandmother doesn't want to search for her. She thinks it would only cause pain. Sola leaned forward. But I can't stop thinking about it. This woman is my aunt. She's family. And she probably has no idea who her birth mother really is or why she was given up. Do you want me to help you find her? The question hung in the air. Sola knew that if she said yes, there would be no going back. She would be betraying her grandmother's explicit wishes. But she also knew that some secrets were too heavy to keep buried. Yes, she whispered. Hyun-woo nodded and pulled out his laptop. The adoption records from that era might be difficult to access, but there are some public databases we can search. Do you have any other information? Just what's on that document and my grandmother's stories about the Civil War. For the next 2 hours, they searched through databases, historical records, and adoption registries. Just as Sola was beginning to lose hope, Hyun-woo suddenly straightened in his chair. I found something, he said, turning the laptop toward her. There was a Lee Chioma registered in the Jeju Island orphanage system in 1963. But her name was changed. He clicked through several screens. She was adopted by a Korean family in 1965. Her new name was Park Min-ji. Sola's heart raced. Can you find out what happened to her after that? Hyun-woo's fingers flew across the keyboard. After several more minutes, he looked up with an expression of disbelief. Park Min-ji became a fairly well-known artist in Seoul. She specializes in mixed media installations exploring themes of identity and displacement. She's alive. Sola felt tears spring to her eyes. Not only alive, she has a website. Hyunwoo turned the screen toward her again. Sola stared at the web page. There were dozens of photos of art installations, but it was the About the Artist section that made her breath catch. The photo showed a woman in her mid-50s with features that were unmistakably mixed Korean and African. She had her grandmother's cheekbones and eyes that held the same depth Sola had seen in old photos of her grandmother as a young woman. The biography read, Park Min-ji explores themes of cultural displacement and identity in her work. Adopted as a young child, she has spent her artistic career investigating what it means to exist between worlds. She knows she's adopted, Sola murmured. There's more. Hyunwoo scrolled down. She has a studio in Seoul. And it looks like she's giving a public talk at a gallery next month about her upcoming exhibition titled Searching for Home. Sola looked at the screen, her mind reeling. Her aunt, because that's what Min-ji was, regardless of the years and distance, was alive, successful, and clearly wrestling with questions about her own identity. The same questions Sola's grandmother had buried for decades. What are you going to do? Hyunwoo asked gently. I don't know. Sola stared at Min-ji's photograph. My grandmother would be devastated if I contacted her without permission. But your aunt deserves to know the truth. Sola nodded slowly. I need to talk to my grandmother again. I need to show her this and make her understand that her daughter has been searching for her too. That evening, Sola returned to her grandmother's house, her phone heavy in her pocket with the weight of the information it contained. She found Adunni in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she always did at this time. Grandma, we need to talk. Adunni's hands stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. I told you that the subject is closed. I found her. The words came out in a rush. I found your daughter. Her name is Park Min-ji. She's an artist in Seoul, and she's alive and successful, and she's been searching for her identity her whole life. The knife fell from Adunni's hands, clattering against the cutting board. She gripped the counter for support. What did you do? I had the document translated. I searched the adoption records. Grandma, she knows she's adopted. She knows she has African heritage. She's been looking for her roots. No. Adunni shook her head violently. No, you had no right. I had every right. She's my family too. Sola pulled out her phone and brought up Min-ji's website. Look at her, Grandma. Look at your daughter. Adunni turned away. I can't. Why? Because you're afraid, because you've been hiding this for so long that you don't know how to stop hiding. Sola's voice rose with frustration. She's been making art about her identity crisis, about feeling displaced and lost. You could give her answers. You could give her peace. I could give her pain. Adunni spun around, her eyes blazing. What do I say to her? Hello, I'm the mother who gave you away. Sorry I didn't come looking for you for 57 years. You tell her the truth. You tell her about the war and the hunger and the impossible choice you made to save her life. Sola held out the phone again. Please, Grandma. Just look at her. For a long moment, Adunni stood frozen. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the phone. Her hands trembled as she looked at the screen. When she saw Min-ji's photograph, a small sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. She has her father's smile, Adunni whispered. Sola moved to stand beside her grandmother, looking at the photo together. She has your eyes. She looks so Aduni's voice broke. She looks whole. She looks happy. She looks like she's searching for something. Sola pointed to the description of Minji's upcoming exhibition. She's been trying to understand where she came from. You could help her understand. Aduni handed the phone back, but Sola saw something shift in her grandmother's expression, a crack in the wall she'd built around this secret. What if she hates me? What if she doesn't? Sola countered. What if she's spent her whole life hoping her birth mother would find her? Over the next few weeks, Sola worked gently to bring her grandmother around to the idea of making contact. She showed her more of Minji's artwork, translating the artist's statements that spoke of longing and displacement. She read aloud interviews where Minji discussed her adoption and her complex feelings about her identity. Slowly, Aduni began to soften. She started asking questions about Minji's life, whether she was married, whether she had children, what kind of person she seemed to be from her public presence. She seems kind, Aduni said one evening, studying a photo of Minji at a charity event for orphans. She's giving back. She's strong, like you, Sola replied. Finally, one night, Aduni sat down at the kitchen table and looked directly at Sola. If I do this, if I try to contact her, you have to promise me something. Anything. If she doesn't want to meet me, if she's angry or hurt or wants nothing to do with me, you won't push. You'll let her make that choice. I promise. Aduni nodded slowly. Then help me write a letter. Crafting the letter took almost 2 weeks. Aduni would write a few sentences, then crumple the paper and start again. She struggled to find words adequate to explain 57 years of silence. Sola sat with her through every draft, offering suggestions but letting her grandmother's voice remain authentic. The final version was simple but powerful. Dear Minji, my name is Aduni Okafor. In 1963, I gave birth to a daughter named Chioma during the Nigerian Civil War. Her father was a Korean doctor named Lee Jae-hyun who was killed in the conflict. I made the impossible choice to send my daughter with the relief mission to Korea, believing she would die if she stayed with me in the war zone. I have thought about her every single day for 57 years. My granddaughter recently found your name and discovered that you are my daughter. I do not expect forgiveness for my silence. I do not expect you to welcome me into your life. I only want you to know that you were loved from the moment you were born, and that choice I made, the choice that has broken my heart every day since, was made because I loved you too much to watch you starve. If you wish to know more about your father or your heritage, I am here. If you prefer to let the past remain in the past, I will understand. You owe me nothing. I owed you the truth. With love and regret, Aduni Okafor. Hyunwoo helped translate the letter into Korean, adding the English version as well. Sola found Minji's studio address on her website. With shaking hands, Aduni sealed the envelope. What if she doesn't respond? Aduni asked as they stood in front of the post office. Then at least you tried, Sola said gently. At least she'll know. Aduni mailed the letter. The waiting was excruciating. Days turned into weeks. Sola watched her grandmother grow increasingly anxious, jumping every time her phone rang, checking the mail multiple times a day even though she knew a response from Korea would take time. 3 weeks after mailing the letter, Sola was at work when her phone rang. It was her grandmother, and the sound of her voice made Sola's heart leap into her throat. She responded, Aduni said, her voice shaking. She sent an email. I don't know how to open it. Can you come home? Sola left work immediately. She found her grandmother sitting at the dining room table, staring at her laptop as if it might explode. The email notification was visible on the screen. the sender's name clearly stating Park Min-ji. "Do you want me to read it first?" Sola asked gently. Adani shook her head. "We read it together." Sola clicked on the email. The message was in English, the words carefully chosen. "Dear Adani, I received your letter yesterday. I have read it 27 times. I don't know what to say or how to feel. I have so many questions. I have so much anger. I also have so much relief. For my entire life, I have felt incomplete. I have felt divided between the face I see in the mirror and the culture I was raised in. I have felt lost. Your letter doesn't erase that pain, but it provides context I have never had. I understand why you made the choice you did. I have studied the Nigerian Civil War. I know what you faced. I think I even understand why you stayed silent for so long. The weight of guilt can be paralyzing. But understanding doesn't mean I'm not hurt. It doesn't mean I don't have questions. It doesn't mean this is easy. I would like to meet you. Not right away, I need time to process this. But eventually, I would like to look into the eyes of the woman who gave me life. I would like to hear stories about my father. I would like to understand where I came from. Would you be open to a video call in 2 weeks that will give me time to prepare myself emotionally? Please let me know. Min-ji." Adani's tears fell silently onto the keyboard. Sola wrapped her arms around her grandmother, and they sat together, crying tears of relief and pain and hope. "She wants to meet me," Adani whispered. "She's angry, but she wants to meet me." "She has every right to be angry," Sola said gently. "But she also wants to know you. That's what matters." The 2 weeks before the video call passed in a blur of emotional preparation. Adani obsessed over what to say, how to present herself, whether she should have her hair done or leave it natural. Sola helped her practice using the video call software, laughing as her grandmother fumbled with the technology. "She's going to think I'm a foolish old woman who doesn't even know how to use a computer," Adani fretted. "She's going to see a woman who loves her," Sola countered. "That's all that matters." On the day of the call, Sola set up the laptop in the living room, positioning it so the light was good and the background looked warm and welcoming. She sat beside her grandmother, holding her hand as they waited for the call to connect. When Min-ji's face appeared on the screen, Adani made a small sound of recognition. Even through the pixels and distance, the resemblance was unmistakable. Min-ji had Adani's bone structure softened by her father's Korean features. She had Adani's expressive eyes and the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. They simply looked at each other, spanning the gulf of 57 years in a single gaze. "Hello," Min-ji said finally, her voice cautious. "Hello," Adani replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You look just like your father." Min-ji's eyes glistened. "Everyone here says I look different. I've never looked like anyone before." "You look like family," Adani said softly. The conversation was halting at first, full of long pauses and careful words. Min-ji asked about the circumstances of her birth, and Adani told her about the war, about the medical mission, about falling in love with Lee Jae-hyun in the midst of chaos. "He was a good man," Adani said. "Gentle and funny and brave. He made me feel safe when nothing was safe. He would have loved you so much." "What happened to him?" Min-ji asked quietly. "The medical camp was bombed. He was trying to save patients when the building collapsed." Adani's voice broke. "I found out I was pregnant a week after he died. You were all I had left of him. Then why did you give me away?" The question was blunt, and Sola heard the pain beneath it. Adani didn't flinch from the question. Because I loved you more than I loved myself. Because I was starving and I knew you would starve too. Because your father was dead and I had no way to provide for you. Because the relief mission could give you a chance at life. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because I thought I was saving you. I didn't realize I was also losing you. Minji wiped her eyes. I used to imagine that my birth mother didn't want me. That I was a burden or a mistake. The family who adopted me was kind, but I always felt like I didn't quite belong. I didn't look like them. I didn't feel like them. You belong to me, Adani said fiercely. You have always belonged to me, even when I couldn't be with you. The conversation went on for nearly 3 hours. They talked about Minji's childhood in Korea, about her struggles with identity, about the art she created as a way of processing her displacement. They talked about Adani's life after the war, about Sola's father, about the family Minji had never known existed. You have a niece, Adani said, gesturing to Sola. This is Adani's granddaughter, Sola. She's the one who found you. She's the one who wouldn't let me keep hiding. Minji turned her attention to Sola, a small smile appearing on her face. Thank you for looking for me. Thank you for giving me back my history. You're my family, Sola said simply. You deserve to know. As the call drew to a close, Minji hesitated, then spoke. I'm having an exhibition in 3 months. It's the one I mentioned, searching for home. I would like you to come to the opening. Both of you. Adani's eyes widened. To Seoul. Yes. I want you to see my work. I want you to meet my friends. I want. Minji's voice caught. I want to hug you. Not through a screen. For real. We'll be there, Sola said before her grandmother could protest about the expense or the distance. We'll absolutely be there. After the call ended, Adani sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she looked at Sola with an expression of wonder. She wants to see me. She wants me at her exhibition. She wants to know her mother, Sola replied. I don't have money for plane tickets to Seoul. Then we'll find a way. We'll fundraise. We'll work extra jobs. We'll do whatever it takes. Sola squeezed her grandmother's hand. This is too important to let money stand in the way. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of preparation. Sola set up a crowdfunding campaign, telling the story of her grandmother and aunt's separation and reunion. The response was overwhelming. People from around the world donated, moved by the story of a mother and daughter finding each other after nearly 6 decades apart. Within 2 weeks, they had enough money for plane tickets and accommodations. The remaining funds would help cover expenses for the trip. Sola's grandmother was overwhelmed by the generosity of strangers. Why would people who don't know us help like this? Adani asked, staring at the donation page. Because everyone understands love, Sola replied. And everyone understands the pain of separation. As the exhibition date approached, Adani became increasingly nervous. She worried about what to wear, what to say, how to act at an art exhibition. Sola helped her choose a traditional Nigerian outfit, a beautiful agbada in rich purple fabric that made her grandmother look regal and elegant. Minji should see where she comes from, Sola said as she helped Adani prepare. She should see her heritage in you. The flight to Seoul was Adani's first time on an airplane. Sola watched her grandmother's face pressed to the window during takeoff, marveling at the world spreading out beneath them. When they landed in Korea, Adani stood in the airport, looking around at the signs in Korean, the Asian faces surrounding them. She grew up here, Adani said softly. This is the world she knows. They checked into a modest hotel near Minji's gallery. The exhibition opening was the following evening, giving them a day to adjust to the time difference and overcome their jet lag. Sola could see her grandmother growing more anxious as the hours ticked by. What if it's different in person? Adani worried. What if seeing me in real life makes her realize she doesn't want this connection? Then we'll deal with that, Sola said firmly. But I don't think that's going to happen. She invited you here, Grandma. She wants this. The evening of the exhibition opening, they arrived at the gallery 30 minutes early. Minji had told them she would be busy with last-minute preparations and that they should just come when the event started. As they walked through the gallery doors, Sola gasped. The entire exhibition was about Minji's search for identity. There were mixed media installations combining Korean and African elements. There were photographs of Minji as a child, clearly different from her Korean peers. There were paintings exploring themes of displacement and belonging. In the center of the gallery stood the largest installation, a massive structure made of traditional Korean hanji paper and African kent cloth, twisted together to form a tree with roots that spread across the floor and branches that reached toward the ceiling. It's called Two Roots, One Tree, a voice said behind them. They turned to find Minji standing there, wearing an elegant black dress and looking both nervous and excited. This was the first time they were seeing each other in person, and the reality of the moment seemed to strike all three of them simultaneously. Adani's hands trembled as she stepped forward. "You're so beautiful." Minji's eyes filled with tears. "So are you." They moved toward each other slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter. When they embraced, Sola had to turn away, her own tears blurring her vision. She gave them privacy, wandering through the exhibition and giving her grandmother and aunt time to simply hold each other. When she returned 15 minutes later, she found them sitting on a bench beneath the tree installation, holding hands and talking quietly. Minji looked up as Sola approached and smiled. "Thank you for finding me," Minji said. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being open to this," Sola replied. "It couldn't have been easy." As the exhibition opening progressed and guests began to arrive, Sola watched Minji introduce Adani to people as "my mother." Each time she said it, Adani's face showed a mixture of pride and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite believe this was real. The gallery was packed with art critics, collectors, and friends of Minji. Many of them approached Adani, curious about the woman who had inspired so much of Minji's work. Adani handled the attention with grace, telling brief versions of her story, always emphasizing that she had made the choice out of love. At one point, a Korean art critic asked Adani what she thought of Minji's work. Adani looked around at the installations exploring identity and displacement, her eyes lingering on the tree made of two different cultural materials. "I think my daughter took the pain of separation and made it into something beautiful," Adani said slowly. "I think she found a way to belong to both worlds instead of being divided by them. I think she's stronger than I ever was." Minji, standing nearby and overhearing, squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm strong because you made a strong choice. You gave me life twice, once when you gave birth to me, and once when you let me go so I could live." Later in the evening, Minji made a speech to the assembled guests. She talked about her artistic journey, her search for identity, and the recent reconnection with her birth family. "For most of my life, I've felt incomplete," she told the crowd. "I've felt like I existed in a liminal space between two cultures, belonging fully to neither. But recently, I discovered that my mother didn't abandon me, she saved me. And in finding her, I found the missing piece of my identity." This exhibition explores the pain of displacement, but it also celebrates the possibility of being whole while honoring both parts of yourself. I am Korean and I am African. I am both and I am neither and I am entirely myself. The crowd applauded, and Sola saw tears streaming down her grandmother's face, tears of pride and joy and relief. After the formal part of the evening ended, Minji took Adunni and Sola on a private tour of the exhibition, explaining the meaning behind each piece. She showed them a series of photographs she'd taken during trips to various African countries, trying to understand that part of her heritage. I went to Nigeria 5 years ago, Minji said quietly. I walked through streets in Lagos, and I wondered if my mother had walked those same streets. I looked at people's faces, searching for features that matched my own. I felt both connected and completely alien. I should have found you sooner, Adunni said, her voice heavy with regret. You found me when we were both ready, Minji replied. I don't think I could have handled this conversation 20 years ago. I was too angry. Too hurt. I needed time to mature and understand the complexity of your choice. They stood in front of a painting titled Mother's Hands. It showed 2 pairs of hands reaching toward each other across a vast distance, their fingertips just barely touching. One pair of hands was clearly African, the other Korean. I painted this 5 years ago, Minji said. Before I knew you were searching for me. Before I knew you had even thought about me. I painted it as a wish, hoping that somewhere, my birth mother was reaching back toward me. She turned to look at Adunni. You were. You just didn't know how to reach. I'm reaching now, Adunni said, taking her daughter's hand. If you'll let me. I'll let you, Minji whispered. They spent the next several days together in Seoul. Minji showed them her studio, introduced them to her friends, and took them to her favorite restaurants. She taught Adunni how to use chopsticks and laughed when Adunni insisted on teaching her how to eat jollof rice with her hands in the traditional Nigerian way. One evening, sitting in Minji's apartment with Sola, the 3 generations of women talked long into the night. Minji asked questions about her father, and Adunni shared every memory she had of Lee Jae-hyun, his kindness, his laugh, his dedication to helping people even in impossible circumstances. He sounds like a good man, Minji said wistfully. He was. You have his compassion. Adunni touched Minji's face gently. And his strength. Do you think he would have been happy with my life? Minji asked. With who I became? He would have been so proud, Adunni said with certainty. You create beauty and meaning from your experiences. You help people understand themselves through your art. That's exactly what he did through medicine. He helped people heal. Minji showed them a small box she'd kept on her shelf. Inside were items she'd collected over the years, things that connected her to her unknown heritage: a piece of Kent cloth, a small African carving, photographs from her trip to Nigeria. I've been collecting pieces of identity, she explained. Trying to construct a sense of self from fragments. But I was missing the most important piece: the story. The truth about why and how I came to be. I'm sorry I kept that from you for so long, Adunni said. I was a coward. You were scared, Minji corrected gently. That's different from cowardice. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. You wrote that letter despite being terrified. That's courage. On their last night in Seoul, Minji took them to a traditional Korean restaurant. As they sat around the low table, sharing food and stories, Sola observed the bond forming between her grandmother and aunt. It wasn't the easy, comfortable relationship of people who had known each other their whole lives. It was more tentative, more careful, 2 people learning to trust each other while carrying the weight of past pain. But it was real, and it was growing stronger. What happens now? Sola asked. After we go home. Minji and Adunni looked at each other. We stay in contact, Minji said. We video call. We email. We learn about each other's lives. She paused. And I'm planning to visit Nigeria next year. I want to see where I was born. I want to understand that part of my history. I'll show you everything, Adunni promised. I'll take you to the village where you were born. I'll introduce you to any relatives who are still alive. I'll tell you every story I can remember about that time. And I'll be there too, Sola added. Family reunion. Family, Minji repeated softly, as if testing the weight of the word. I've spent so long feeling like I didn't have one. Now I have two: the family that raised me and the family I came from. You've always had this family, Adunni said firmly. You just didn't know where we were. At the airport, saying goodbye was difficult. Adunni held Minji for a long time, as if trying to make up for all the embraces they'd missed over the decades. I love you, Adunni said. I need you to know that I have loved you every single day of your life, even when I couldn't be with you. I know, Minji replied. And I'm starting to love you too. It's not automatic we have to build this relationship. But I want to build it. That's all I can ask for, Adunni said. On the plane ride home, Adunni was quiet, looking out the window at the clouds below. Sola sat beside her, giving her grandmother space to process everything that had happened. Finally, Adunni spoke. Thank you for not letting me hide. Thank you for pushing me to face this. Thank you for being brave enough to face it, Sola replied. I wasted so much time, Adunni said sadly. So many years when I could have known her. You can't change the past, Grandma. But you can build the future. You have that now. Adunni nodded slowly. Yes. We have now. And we have tomorrow. Over the following months, Adunni and Minji talked regularly via video calls. Their conversations grew longer and more comfortable as they learned each other's rhythms and personalities. Minji sent photos of her daily life, and Adunni shared stories and recipes from Nigeria. True to her word, Minji planned a trip to Nigeria. She arrived during the dry season, and Sola picked her up from the airport in Lagos. It was strange seeing her aunt in Nigeria, watching her take in the sights and sounds and smells of her birth country. It's overwhelming, Minji admitted as they drove through the crowded streets. Everything is so vibrant. So alive. Wait until you taste the food, Sola said with a grin. They drove to the village where Adunni still lived, where Minji had been born 57 years earlier. As they pulled up to the house, Adunni came out to meet them, her face bright with joy. The village had organized a small celebration for Minji's arrival. Neighbors who remembered the civil war and Adunni's relationship with the Korean doctor came to meet the daughter who had been sent away all those years ago. They marveled at her mixed features, her Korean mannerisms, her careful English. You are the child of two worlds, one elder said, studying her face. A bridge between peoples. Adunni took Minji to the old medical compound where the relief mission had been stationed. Most of it had been torn down long ago, but the foundation remained. They stood together on the ground where Minji had been born, where her father had worked and ultimately died. This is where your story began, Adunni said quietly. In the middle of war and death, you were life and hope. Minji knelt and touched the ground, her fingers trailing through the red earth. I always wondered what this place looked like. In my imagination, it was more dramatic somehow. But this is just earth and sky and the same sun that shines in Korea. Home isn't always a place, Adunni said. Sometimes it's the people who hold your story. They spent 2 weeks together in Nigeria. Adani taught Minji how to cook traditional dishes. They visited relatives who had known Minji's father during the war, who could share stories that Adani had forgotten. They went to markets and churches and sat on the porch in the evening, watching the sun set while they talked. One afternoon, as they were sorting through old photographs, Minji found a picture of her father. It was worn and faded, but it clearly showed Lee Jae-hyun in his medical uniform, smiling at the camera with kind eyes. "Can I keep this?" Minji asked, her voice thick with emotion. "It's yours," Adani said. "He was your father. His memory belongs to you as much as it belongs to me." On Minji's last evening in Nigeria, the three women Adani, Minji, and Sola sat together under the stars. The night was warm and clear, insects chirping in the darkness around them. "When I first found that paper in your Bible," Sola said, "I never imagined it would lead to this. To us, all together like this. I tried so hard to keep that secret buried," Adani said. "I thought hiding it would protect everyone. But secrets don't protect, they just isolate. I'm glad the secret is out," Minji said. "Even with all the complicated emotions, even with the pain of processing everything, I'm glad to know the truth. I'm glad to know you." "What will you do now?" Adani asked. "Will you keep making art about identity?" "I'll keep making art," Minji replied. "But it will be different now. It won't be about searching anymore. It will be about integration. About carrying multiple identities and letting them coexist rather than compete." She paused. "And I want to create a piece about us. About this reunion. About mothers and daughters and the choices we make out of love." "What will you call it?" Sola asked. Minji thought for a moment, looking between her mother and her niece. "Found," she said finally. "I'll call it Found." 3 months later, Minji's new exhibition opened in Seoul. She had flown Adani and Sola out for the opening, wanting them to see this new work that had been inspired by their reunion. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a massive installation that took up the entire main gallery space. It consisted of two halves. One side was decorated in traditional Korean elements, the other in Nigerian ones. But rather than being separated, the two sides merged in the center, the materials and colors blending together to create something entirely new and uniquely beautiful. Suspended from the ceiling were hundreds of photographs showing moments from their reunion: Adani and Minji's first embrace, meals shared around Adani's table, Minji touching the ground where she was born, the 3 generations of women laughing together. Around the installation, Minji had placed text panels with excerpts from their conversations, their emails, their video calls. The words told the story of separation and reunion, of pain transformed into understanding, of a family rebuilt across cultures and decades. Standing in the center of the installation, Adani was overwhelmed. "You made something beautiful from our pain," she said to Minji. "I learned that from you," Minji replied. "You took an impossible situation and made the most loving choice you could. You turned sacrifice into salvation. I'm just documenting that transformation." A group of journalists had come to the opening, interested in the story behind the work. One of them approached Adani with a microphone. "Mrs. Okafor, how does it feel to be reunited with your daughter after so many years?" Adani considered the question carefully. "It feels like I can finally breathe fully," she said. "For 57 years, I held my breath, carrying the weight of that choice. Now I can exhale. Now I can heal. Do you have any regrets?" "I regret the time we lost. But I don't regret the choice that saved her life." Adani looked at Minji across the gallery. "She's alive and thriving and creating beauty in the world. How could I regret that?" Another journalist turned to Minji. As an adoptee who has reconnected with your birth family, what would you say to others in similar situations? Minji thought carefully before responding. I would say that it's complicated. Reunion doesn't erase the pain of separation. Learning the reasons behind your adoption doesn't automatically heal all wounds. But truth has value. Understanding has value. And the possibility of connection, even imperfect, complicated connection, has value. She paused. I would also say that every situation is unique. My story ended with reunion and healing, but that won't be true for everyone. The important thing is to approach it with honesty and realistic expectations. What's next for you three? A journalist asked, gesturing to include Sola. The three women looked at each other and smiled. We keep building, Sola said. We keep learning about each other. We keep showing up. Family isn't just blood, Minji added. It's choice and effort and showing up even when it's hard. We're choosing each other every day. And that's enough, Adani finished. That's everything. As the exhibition continued over the following weeks, it gained significant attention in the art world. Critics praised Minji's honest exploration of adoption, identity, and reunion. More importantly, the exhibition resonated with adoptees and birth parents around the world who saw their own experiences reflected in the work. Adani received several messages through Minji from other birth mothers who had made similar choices during times of war or hardship. They thanked her for sharing her story, for showing that it was possible to reconnect even after decades of separation. Minji heard from fellow adoptees who had been searching for their birth families or who had given up hope of ever finding them. They told her that her story had inspired them to try again, to keep searching, to stay open to the possibility of connection. 6 months after the Seoul exhibition, Minji's work traveled to a gallery in Lagos. This time, she was showing her art to Nigerian audiences, people who understood the Civil War context, who could recognize the traditional elements she'd incorporated into her work. The opening in Lagos was different from the one in Seoul. Here, people came up to Adani with tears in their eyes, thanking her for surviving, for making the hard choice, for staying strong. They treated Minji as a returning daughter, celebrating her success and welcoming her home. How does it feel? Sola asked Minji as they watched the crowds move through the exhibition. Being celebrated in both your countries. It feels like I finally understand what it means to belong, Minji said thoughtfully. I don't have to choose between being Korean and being Nigerian. I can be both. I can honor both. I can create from both. 1 year after the initial reunion, the three women returned to the village where Minji had been born. This time, they brought a stone memorial to place at the site of the old medical compound. The plaque read, "In memory of Dr. Lee Jae-hyun and all who served with the medical relief mission during the Nigerian Civil War. Their courage saved lives and built bridges between nations." As they placed the memorial, a small crowd of villagers gathered. Some of them had known Jae-hyun. Others simply wanted to witness this moment of remembrance and healing. My father has a memorial now, Minji said softly, touching the stone. He won't be forgotten. Neither will you, Adani replied. Neither will any of us. They stood together, 3 generations of women, bound by blood and choice, by separation and reunion, by pain transformed into beauty. Around them, the village that had witnessed so much suffering now witnessed something else: healing, connection, and the enduring power of love to bridge any distance. As the sun set over the Nigerian landscape, Sola took a photograph of her grandmother and aunt standing together beside the memorial. In the golden light, they looked not like 2 people reunited after decades apart, but like 2 people who had always belonged together because in the ways that mattered most, they always had. The story of Adani and Minji spread beyond the art world. It was picked up by news outlets, featured in documentaries about adoption and reunion, shared in support groups for birth mothers and adoptees. Their willingness to share their complicated, painful, beautiful story helped others find the courage to seek their own truths. But for the three women themselves, the attention was secondary. What mattered was the relationship they continued to build, imperfect, sometimes difficult, but always honest and always growing. Minji started spending more time in Nigeria, eventually buying a small apartment in Lagos where she could work on her art while staying close to her birth family. Adunni traveled to Seoul twice more, growing more comfortable with the technology and the travel, proud to see her daughter's success firsthand. And Sola, who had started all of this by refusing to let a secret stay buried, watched her family expand and heal. She documented their journey, writing about it and speaking about it, helping other families navigate similar reunions. 2 years after finding the adoption papers, Sola stood in Minji's Lagos apartment, helping her aunt prepare for another exhibition. This one was titled Home, a Work in Progress, and it explored the ongoing process of integration and identity formation. "Do you ever regret it?" Sola asked. "Reaching out to your birth mother, opening up this complicated chapter of your life?" Minji set down the paintbrush she'd been holding and looked directly at Sola. "Not for a single moment. Yes, it's been complicated. Yes, there are hard days when the grief of all those lost years feels overwhelming. But I would rather live with complicated truths than comfortable lies. I would rather have this imperfect, beautiful connection than nothing at all." "That's what I thought when I first found the paper," Sola said. "That truth mattered more than comfort." "You were right." Minji smiled. "Thank you for being right. Thank you for not letting anyone stay hidden." That evening, Adunni joined them for dinner at Minji's apartment. They cooked together Nigerian jollof rice with Korean side dishes, a fusion meal that represented their merged family. As they ate, they talked about the future. "I'm planning another trip to Korea next month," Adunni said. "Minji's friend is getting married, and she invited me to the wedding." "You're becoming quite the world traveler, Grandma," Sola teased. "I'm making up for lost time," Adunni replied with a smile that held both joy and lingering sadness. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more bearable, a scar rather than an open wound. "I've been thinking," Minji said carefully, "about writing a book. Our story. With both of our perspectives. The separation, the silence, the search, the reunion. All of it." Adunni was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot of vulnerability to share with the world." "It is," Minji agreed. "But if our story can help even one person find the courage to search for truth, or one birth mother find the courage to reach out, or one adoptee feel less alone, isn't that worth it?" Adunni reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Then we write it. We tell it all. The pain and the joy and everything in between. Together," Minji said. "Together," Adunni agreed. And so they did. Over the next year, mother and daughter worked together to chronicle their story. They sat for hours with a recorder running, sharing memories and emotions they'd never voiced before. They went through old documents, photographs, and records. They interviewed people who had been part of their journey, the villagers who remembered the Civil War, the adoption agency workers who could provide context, the art world colleagues who had witnessed Minji's artistic evolution. The process was often difficult. There were days when Adunni couldn't continue because the grief was too overwhelming. There were days when Minji's anger at all the lost years would surface, and they would have to work through it together. But they kept going, committed to telling the truth in all its complexity. When the book was finally published, it became an international sensation. Readers were moved by the honesty of both voices, Aduni's perspective as a mother who made an impossible choice, and Minji's perspective as a daughter trying to understand and forgive. The book sparked conversations about adoption ethics, about the long-term impact of war on families, and about the importance of preserving birth-family connections even in international adoptions. But more than that, it gave hope to thousands of separated families. Birth mothers who had hidden their past pregnancies found the courage to reach out. Adoptees who had given up on finding their birth families started searching again. Adoption agencies began implementing more transparent practices and supporting reunion efforts. At the book launch in Lagos, the hall was packed with people whose lives had been touched by separation and reunion. When Aduni and Minji took the stage together, the applause was thunderous. "We want to be clear," Minji said into the microphone. "Our story is not a fairy tale. Reunion didn't erase the pain of separation. It didn't make the lost years disappear. But it gave us something precious, the truth, and the chance to build a relationship based on that truth. I spent 57 years carrying guilt and grief in silence," Aduni added. "I want other mothers to know that it's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to tell the truth. Your children deserve to know their story, and you deserve the chance to explain your choices." After the formal presentation, they opened the floor to questions. A young woman stood up, her voice shaking. "I'm an adoptee. I found my birth mother last year, but she won't meet me. She says the past should stay in the past. What would you say to her?" Aduni's expression was full of compassion. "I would tell her that I understand her fear. I felt that same fear for decades. But I would also tell her that she's not just closing the door on the past, she's closing the door on a possible future relationship with you. And that's a choice she may come to regret even more deeply than the original separation." Another person stood, an older woman who introduced herself as a birth mother. "I placed my son for adoption 40 years ago. I think about him every day, but I'm terrified of disrupting his life. How do I know if I should reach out?" "You reach out," Minji said gently. "You give him the choice. Write a letter explaining your circumstances and making it clear that you have no expectations. Let him decide if he wants contact. Not knowing is harder than any response he could give." As the Q&A continued, Sola watched her grandmother and aunt on stage, marveling at how far they'd come. 2 years ago, her grandmother had been desperate to keep the secret buried. Now she was standing in front of hundreds of people, sharing that same secret to help others heal. After the event, as they were packing up, a teenage girl approached them shyly. "My parents adopted me from China," she said. "I've always wondered about my birth mother, but I didn't want to hurt my adopted parents' feelings by searching. Your book made me realize I can love both families. Thank you for that." Minji hugged the girl. "You can absolutely love both families. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide." That night, back at Aduni's house, the three women sat together on the porch as they had done many times over the past 2 years. The familiar sounds of the village surrounded them, distant music, neighbors talking, dogs barking, children playing. "Did you ever imagine," Sola asked, "when you hid that paper in your Bible all those years ago, that it would lead to all of this?" Aduni shook her head. "I imagined she was lost to me forever. I imagined I would carry that secret to my grave." She looked at Minji. "I never imagined I would get the chance to know my daughter, to explain my choices, to build a relationship despite all the years and distance between us. I imagined my birth mother 1,000 different ways," Minji said. "But I never quite imagined you. You're more complex than any fantasy I created. More real. More flawed. More lovable. And I never imagined having an aunt, Sola added. Or going to Korea. Or being part of a reunion that would touch so many lives. All because I found a paper and refused to pretend I hadn't seen it. Thank you for that stubbornness, Adunni said, pulling Sola close. Thank you for not letting us hide. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Minji spoke. You know what I've learned through all of this, that family isn't just about biology or raising someone. It's about witnessing each other's truth and choosing to stay even when it's hard. It's about showing up, Sola agreed. It's about love that survives everything, Adunni added. Even war. Even decades of separation. Even pain and anger and grief. Love survives. In the years that followed, the three women continued to build their family. Minji divided her time between Seoul and Lagos, creating art that bridged her two cultures. Adunni became a spokesperson for birth mothers' rights, advocating for more support and less stigma. Sola completed her degree and began working with adoption agencies to facilitate respectful, ethical reunions. They faced challenges, of course. There were moments when the old pain resurfaced, when the lost years felt too heavy to bear. But they had learned to face those moments together, to support each other through the difficult days while celebrating the good ones. On the 5th anniversary of their reunion, they returned to the memorial they had placed for Lee Jae-hyun. This time, they added a second plaque. It read, "In honor of all families separated by circumstance but reunited by courage. May we never stop reaching for each other across any distance." As they stood together at the memorial, 3 generations of women bound by blood and choice, a group of villagers gathered to witness the ceremony. Among them was a young woman holding a baby, her own daughter, whom she had briefly considered placing for adoption before deciding to keep her. "Your story gave me courage," the woman said to Adunni. "I was in an impossible situation, like you were. But I saw how much pain the separation caused both of you, even though it was the right choice at the time. I decided to find another way. Your honesty saved me from a lifetime of regret." Adunni embraced the woman and her baby. "Whatever choice you make out of love for your child is the right choice. There is no shame in any of it." As the sun set over the memorial, casting long shadows across the ground where Minji had been born, the women joined hands, grandmother, daughter, granddaughter, and a stranger who had become part of their extended family through shared experience. "What we've built here," Minji said, looking around at the gathered crowd, "is bigger than us. It's a community of people who refuse to let secrets keep them separated. Who chooses the truth even when it's painful. Who believes in the possibility of healing." It started with one piece of paper in a Bible, Sola marveled. One secret that couldn't stay hidden. "It started with love," Adunni corrected gently. "Everything starts and ends with love. The love that made me give her away. The love that made her reach back. The love that keeps us together now." As night fell and the gathering dispersed, Adunni, Minji, and Sola remained at the memorial a while longer. They were quiet, each processing their own thoughts and feelings about the journey they'd been on together. "I have no regrets," Adunni said finally, breaking the silence. "About any of it. The choice I made. The years of silence. Even the pain. Because it led us here, to this moment, to this relationship." "I have one regret," Minji said softly. Both Adunni and Sola looked at her in surprise. "What?" Adunni asked, concern evident in her voice. "I regret that we can't get back the time we lost." Minji's eyes glistened with tears. "I regret that I didn't grow up knowing you. That my children will never know what it's like to have a grandmother who was there from the beginning. I regret every birthday and holiday and ordinary Tuesday that we spent apart. Adunni pulled her daughter close. I regret that too. Every single day, I regret that. But we have now. We have today and tomorrow and all the days after. That's what we focus on. That's what we celebrate, Sola added, joining the embrace. And so they did. In the years that followed, they built memories to fill some of the emptiness left by all those lost years. They celebrated holidays together, alternating between Korea and Nigeria. They supported each other through challenges and triumphs. They showed up for each other in all the ways that family should. Minji had a daughter of her own, naming her Chioma in honor of her birth name. When little Chioma was born, Adunni held her great-granddaughter and wept tears of joy, grateful to have lived long enough to see her lineage continue. You have 3 grandmothers, Minji told baby Chioma as she grew old enough to understand. You have grandmother Kim who raised me in Korea. You have grandmother Adunni who gave birth to me in Nigeria. And you have grandmother Sola's mother. You are loved across continents and cultures. Little Chioma grew up speaking Korean, English, and Yoruba. She grew up eating kimchi and jollof rice. She grew up with artwork on the walls that celebrated all the cultures that made up her family tree. She grew up knowing that families can be complicated and that love can bridge any distance. On Adunni's 85th birthday, her family gathered to celebrate Minji and her family from Korea, Sola, and her young son, cousins and friends and neighbors from the village. As Adunni looked around at all the faces, at all the love, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. I have something to say, she announced, quieting the crowd. 57 years ago, I made a choice that broke my heart. I sent my daughter away, believing I would never see her again. For decades, I carried that pain in silence, believing I deserved to suffer for what I had done. She paused, looking directly at Minji. But 5 years ago, my granddaughter found a secret I had hidden, and she refused to let it stay hidden. She gave me back my daughter. She gave us both the truth. And she taught me that it's never too late to reach for the people we love. Adunni raised her glass. So I want to toast to the truth. To have courage. To families built by choice and biology. To love that survives everything. And especially to my daughters, both of them who have made my life complete. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Minji came forward and embraced her mother, both of them crying happy tears. Sola joined them, and little Chioma climbed into the group hug, not fully understanding but sensing the importance of the moment. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, the core family sat together under the stars. Adunni, now getting tired but still sharp-minded, looked at each of her family members. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise that you'll never let secrets come between you. Promise that you'll always choose truth, even when it's hard. Promise that you'll reach for each other across any distance." "We promise," they said in unison. "And promise that you'll tell our story. Tell it to little Chioma as she grows up. Tell it to anyone who needs to hear that reunion is possible. Tell it so that no one else spends 57 years believing they don't deserve their own happy ending." "We promise," they repeated. Adunni leaned back in her chair, a smile on her weathered face. "Then I am content. I spent most of my life carrying grief, but I will leave this world carrying joy. That's all anyone can ask for." She lived 3 more years, long enough to see little Chioma start school, long enough to see Sola get married, long enough to see Minji's work displayed in the National Museum of Korea. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, her last words were, "I found her. I found my daughter." At her funeral, attended by people from 3 continents, Minji gave the eulogy. "My mother gave me life twice," she said. "Once when she gave birth to me, and once when she let me go so I could survive. And then, incredibly, she gave me life a 3rd time when she found the courage to reach back across the years and claim me as her daughter." She paused, looking out at the gathered crowd. Our story is not unique. Across the world, there are thousands of families separated by circumstance, by war, poverty, illness, impossible choices. My mother's legacy is not just our reunion. It's the message she spread with her courage, that it's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to reach for love. It's never too late to come home. After the funeral, as they were sorting through Aduni's belongings, Sola found the original adoption document, the paper that had started everything. It was carefully preserved now, pressed between the pages of the Bible where Aduni had kept it for so many years. "We should frame this," Sola said. "Keep it as a reminder." "A reminder of what?" little Chioma asked, looking at the yellowed paper with its Korean characters. "A reminder that secrets are meant to be revealed," Minji said, kneeling down to her daughter's level. "A reminder that truth matters. A reminder that families can find each other across any distance. A reminder that love always finds a way," Sola added. They did frame it. It now hangs in Minji's home, a testament to the power of truth and the enduring nature of love. Below it is a photograph of 3 generations of women, Aduni, Minji, and Sola, taken on the 1st anniversary of their reunion. Their arms are around each other, their smiles genuine, their connection visible in every detail of the image. And beside that photograph is a newer one, Minji, Sola, and little Chioma, standing in the same pose, carrying on the legacy of a love that survived war, separation, decades of silence, and finally triumphantly found its way home. So if you've been moved by this incredible journey of separation and reunion, if you believe in the power of truth to heal and the courage it takes to bridge impossible distances, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below about your own family stories or thoughts on adoption and reunion. I read every single one. And if you think someone needs to hear this message today, share this video with them. Because sometimes, like Sola, we all need the courage to uncover hidden truths and reach for the connections that matter most. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's never too late to reach for love.